morning. It's great to be back. Thank you all for having me this morning. Good to be back with the Republican Jewish Coalition. My wife, Mary Pat, and I are proud to be here and proud to be allies and supporters in the causes that we all believe in. We watch what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now. And I think it brings us an incredible focus about what our mission is over the course of the next number of years. There's no question that leadership matters. And if we didn't know that before, and we didn't know that Barack Obama's phrase that elections have consequences was correct, we've seen it over the last 9 months. This past Tuesday was the beginning of the new era for the Republican Party. Let me make one thing really clear. The only reason to affiliate with a political party, the only reason to support a political party is to win. Nothing else matters. If you don't win, you can't govern. And winning campaigns are always the campaigns that look forward and not backwards. I'll tell you a story. Yeah, that deserves applause, because if we don't get it, we're going to lose. Let me tell you a quick story from 2013 when I was running for re-election for governor in the aftermath of Superstorm Sandy. The boardwalk in Asbury Park had been destroyed. We rebuilt it in less than 6 months. And I went there to walk on that boardwalk and, honestly, to take a victory lap for having gotten it done that quickly. And a voter came up to me and said, "Governor, you're running for re-election." And I said, he goes, "Why should I vote for you this time?" And I said, "Well, look at this boardwalk, rebuilt in 6 months. No one thought it could be done." And he said, no, that's what I got for voting for you last time. What do I get for voting for you this time? What voters remember and understand better than many people in the political community is that these things are always about tomorrow. And if we don't articulate a vision for what we want to do for this country, then the voters will abandon us. And they have. And we saw it happen. Now look, anybody in this room who is a supporter of President Trump's, the line forms behind me. And here's why. I was the first major office holder in the country to endorse him in 2016. I chaired his transition. I played Hillary Clinton in debate prep. You want the videos of that, believe me. You want the videos of that. I chaired his opioid commission to deal with the scourge of drug abuse in this country, which killed over 80,000 Americans last year. We needed to get on that. And then I played Joe Biden in debate prep in 2020. So for all people who say they're supporters of President Trump, the line begins behind me. I started that, but let me tell you something else. We can no longer talk about the past and the past elections. No matter where you stand on that issue, no matter where you stand, it is over. And every minute that we spend talking about 2020, while we're wasting time doing that, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi, and Chuck Schumer are laying ruin to this country. We better focus on that and take our eyes off the rearview mirror and start looking through the windshield again. And there's a formula to do it. There's a formula to do it. In 2009, when I announced for governor of New Jersey, a state that has not supported a Republican presidential candidate for 35 years, a state that has not elected a Republican to the United States Senate in 50 years, the longest streak of any state in America, a pretty blue state. George W. Bush's approval ratings in New Jersey as he left office were 18%. 18%. On election day of 2009, Barack Obama's approval ratings in New Jersey were plus 21. plus 21, and we won. In the face of Barack Obama, who had won the year before by 17 points in New Jersey, we won. There's a formula for doing it. And we need to get back to that because it focuses on all four types of voters that we need to gather to win. First, we need to look at suburban voters. And what do suburban voters want? What suburban voters want is a government that is honest and truthful and efficient and not wasting their money and not wasting their time. They want it to be sane and rational, and they want it to speak to them. Rural voters want to make sure that we're not giving payoffs to big business, that we're supporting small businesses and entrepreneurs all across rural areas in this country so they have an opportunity to rise up, and we can appeal to those voters as well. Blue-collar voters just want us to tell them the truth about their future and the truth about their children's future, and to give them an opportunity to grow and prosper. And urban voters, yes, we can appeal to urban voters. And if you don't believe it, in 2013, when I was reelected, I won 51% of the Hispanic vote and 29% of the African-American vote in a blue state. And you know what we talked about almost exclusively? Entrepreneurship, opportunity in business, and choice in education, so they can get their families and their children out of these failure factories in these public schools in urban areas that are failing those families and failing those children. And let me tell you, if you don't think education is going to be the biggest issue as we go into 2022 and putting parents back in control of their children's future, not the teachers union, then you're not listening to what the American people said last Tuesday and not listening to what's happening every day in urban centers and suburban areas all across our country. I took on the teachers union 12 years ago, and I've never stopped. And guess what? Joe Biden's given them oxygen. We have to cut off that oxygen and put control of education back with parents. And when I say government shouldn't waste money, look at what's going on down there right now. And look at the extraordinary waste that's going on, and all that waste is being put on all of us. All of us. The idea that the Biden administration wants to pay $1 million a family to families who came over the border illegally. When was it ever the case that hardworking American taxpayers who follow the rules, follow the law, have to pay for those who don't? And not pay for them to go to jail, but to pay for them to relocate in the United States with $1 million gift for the American taxpayer. If you know nothing else about the craziness of what Joe Biden is doing, just remember that one. And that's what suburban, urban, rural, and other voters were talking about on Tuesday night, and why they voted for Glenn Youngkin and almost voted for a new Republican governor in New Jersey, but added legislative seats. We need to understand that giving away money for free to people doesn't make them want to go to work, doesn't make them want to follow the law, and the only thing it does is penalize the hardworking taxpayers who put that money in there in the first place and are going to be responsible to pay the tab when the check comes much later on. I don't think that's what the Republican Party's ever stood for, and we should no longer be the party who turns a blind eye to debt. We did that for a number of years. We said the debt didn't matter. We ran up huge deficits. And you know what we did? We gave permission to Joe Biden and the Democrats to run up even bigger ones. The Republican Party has to stand again for the hardworking, working-class taxpayers in this country, so many of whom are in this room right now and worked for everything you got. You should not have that taken away from you to give it to someone else who breaks the law or doesn't want to work to build their family's future themselves. Inflation is getting higher and higher every day. The cost of everything is getting more expensive. And government's response under Joe Biden and the Democrats is to make government more expensive, is to pile on. We need to stand for the idea that at times like this, when everything else is more expensive, government has to be less expensive. Government can't be the thing that continues to drive costs and take more money out of people's pockets. These are things that we have to stand for as Republicans. and around the world, we need to once again be clear-eyed about who our adversaries are and who they are not. Republican president, any president, but particularly a Republican one, should never be throwing bouquets at a murdering communist dictator in China. We should never be telling that person they're doing something well, when what they're doing is gathering people across China, putting them in concentration camps and killing them. That's what Xi Jinping is doing every day in China. And he's doing it with American money, with American support, that kills manufacturing jobs here, that takes things away from our economy here. 40 years ago, we had an idea that if we brought capitalism to China, that would mean democracy would come to China too. I'm not saying it was a bad idea 40 years ago, but it's proven to be a bad idea because all we've done is build their economy while they continue to remain authoritarian communists. The battle of the 21st century is between the United States and China. And you look at what happens every day to the Chinese people, restrictions on how many children they can have, restrictions on where they can live, restrictions on what profession they can practice, restrictions on who they can vote for, or if they can vote at all. We have problems in the United States, no question, but put that vision against the vision of China, and we've got to make sure the world understands that that's the choice. And the American president must be clear every day that that is the choice. And that's not the choice just between America and China. Those choices are all over the world, between North Korea and South Korea. And with what Iran wants to do in the Middle East. There are good players and there are murderous players in this world. We must always stand with the righteous and good players and fight against the demagogues and the murderers across this country, in Iran, in North Korea, and in China. And don't forget Russia either. People want us to be direct with them. They want someone to fight for them. But they want them to fight in a way that doesn't hurt their ears. And you all know what I mean by that. We can't dismiss any aspect of our electorate. We have to listen to all of them. And we have to speak to their dreams, their hopes, their aspirations for the future. If we don't do that, then we won't once again win back the voters that we began to win back in Virginia and New Jersey last Tuesday night. I had a political science professor in college who told me, look, if you ever run for office, remember one thing. When your adversary's in the midst of committing suicide, don't commit murder. The result is the same. The Democrats are handing us opportunities, but we have to seize those opportunities. We have to seize those opportunities, and we need to be clear-eyed about how we do it. And that happens both here at home and abroad. When I was governor of New Jersey, what I made very clear to people were what the things were that I stood for, and that I was willing to fight against the hostile media. And I don't care any other speaker that comes up here and speaks to all of you today. If you spend every day for 8 years standing in front of the New York media and the Philadelphia media, you know what hostile media is all about. Now, we shouldn't be complaining about this. Complaining gets us nowhere. What we need to do is continue to speak the truth. And this is where I kind of want to end up with you all today. The truth matters. The truth matters very, very much. And we all get into these inter-party battles, and we want to win every fight we can. And I'm never somebody who likes to lose any fight. But the biggest fight we can't lose is the fight to stand for the truth. Joe Biden ran saying he was going to unite the country and be a moderate force for good. He came into office and he ran immediately to the left to put together some of the craziest policies you'll ever see on the domestic side, and to embarrass and humiliate the American people in Afghanistan. I was never, ever more ashamed of an American president than I was in watching Joe Biden steward over people in Afghanistan who were clinging onto the bottoms of planes to try to escape their own country because they knew the fate they were about to suffer. He sat there and told us that no American who wanted to leave would be left behind. Yet as we sit here today, Americans are being held hostage in Afghanistan by the Taliban. He tells us that's not true. But yet we see the reports day after day after day. Truth matters. Truth matters both here at home and around the world and how we're viewed. And we can't compromise on truth anymore, everybody. We can't say truth is just something that works for us when it's convenient. It's got to work for us all the time. And the Republican Party has always been the party of truth. We're the ones who stood up and called the Soviet Union the evil empire. We're the ones that stood up over and over again in the Middle East for Israel against those that wanted to destroy them. We're the ones who have stood up all around the world against lying and against tyranny. We got to get back to basics here. And those basics are pretty simple. We've got to stand for a country that rewards entrepreneurism, that rewards small businesses. Remember, the idea that we're going to start taxing these people and giving huge benefits to big companies when a third of the small businesses in this country were destroyed during COVID is disgraceful. It's time to get back to helping the small businessman, the small businesswoman build those jobs all through this country, and we can do it. But all of that requires us to tell the truth, to be honest, and to have it be about the people we serve, not about us. All too often, people who get behind these podiums, they like to talk about themselves. And politics is a bit of sales. It has to be. But the problems we face today are too grave for us to be talking about ourselves. We got to be talking about and listening to the people who are suffering right now. The families who have suffered from COVID personally and economically. The families who have suffered from an economy that is driving prices up while they can't afford to pay their bills. And all those voters were crying out from Virginia and New Jersey Tuesday night. So why do I come here and tell all of you that? As I look out at this room, not only all of you, but the people that you represent, and you represent hundreds of thousands of people across America who are very much like all of you. This is a room filled with success. This is a room full of leaders. You wouldn't be here if you weren't a leader. And so now the question becomes, as we leave the tumult of the last few years and we confront the very real assault on the capitalist system and our system of fairness in this country by what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now, what are all of us going to do? What's our responsibility as leaders in our communities, in our states, and in our country? You know, the founders of this country made some things very clear to us over time, and I will tell you, I have a favorite founder. It's not George Washington, although he was amazing. Not Thomas Jefferson, another amazing leader. Not Benjamin Franklin, not even the very hip and famous Alexander Hamilton. My favorite founder is John Adams. Now, some people will say that Adams is my favorite founder because he is cranky and slightly overweight. I think those are wonderful attributes in a leader. But that's not why I love Adams. Adams was the heartbeat of the revolution. Adams was a person who stood on the floor of the Continental Congress day after day after day and said it was only going to be independence that brought the people of this continent true freedom, true liberty, true happiness. He was shouted down day after day after day by his colleagues from all over the country, from Pennsylvania and South Carolina from Georgia and New York. They shouted Adams down. He kept getting up every day and saying it. And it was because of the will of people like John Adams and his wife Abigail that this country came into being. 40 years later, after Adams had served as an ambassador, after Adams had served as vice president, and had served as the second president of the United States, he was back in retirement writing for his diary. And he said he was writing this for posterity. He was writing it for us, for all of us, people he'd never know, but who he dreamed could exist in the country that he had formed. And this is what he wrote. He wrote, "You shall never know the sacrifices that were made to secure for you your liberty. I pray you make a good use of it. For if you do not, I shall repent in heaven for ever having made the sacrifice at all." As Adams looks down on us and this country today, what would he say our obligation is? What can we do to make sure that he does not repent in heaven for having made the sacrifices that laid the foundation for the greatest country the world has ever known? They're not storming over the border in Mexico because this still isn't the greatest place in the world for opportunity and freedom and liberty. They're not waiting in line in countries all across the world to come here legally because this isn't any longer a country where everyone has a chance to be great. But we already have that. We are the luckiest people in the world. We have the birthright to be Americans. Or many of you in this room may have immigrated here legally and worked to gain your citizenship. Either way, we are now in an extraordinarily lucky class that Adams is looking on and judging, rightfully judging, because he made that sacrifice. I suggest to you that what you all need to do is in every way that you can demand more of the people who run this government. Demand more of the people who offer themselves for service. Don't rationalize and accept anything less than truth-telling and sincerity, honesty and integrity, and a plan for tomorrow, not a grievance about yesterday. That's what we must demand. But you have to do it. If you don't, it won't happen. And if you want any evidence of that, look around you. It hasn't happened. And it never happens in this country without people like you standing up and demanding it and rewarding those who provide it to you. We have extraordinary opportunities over the next few years. Our opponents have once again overreached, misunderstood the American people, and we now have to work to lay out an alternate vision. One that's about tomorrow, not about yesterday. One that's about their hopes and their dreams and not about someone else's hopes and dreams. Not about the people who stand behind these podiums, but the people who are out in this country working hard right now. That's what we need to do. And it's not flashy, but it's tough. And you need someone who's willing to fight to be able to do it, and not fight for themselves first, but fight for this country first. Because none of us would have the opportunities that we've already had in our fantastic American lives without others before us being willing to make exactly the same sacrifice, starting with John and Abigail Adams and working all the way through to today. You know, somehow it became less vogue recently in the Republican Party to talk about Ronald Reagan. But Ronald Reagan laid it out very clearly for us when he left office about the way he saw this country as a shining city on a hill. And we've heard it before, but I think we need to be reminded that we don't have to be a country that's pessimistic. We better be a country that's optimistic because of the gifts we have. And we don't need to be yelling and screaming at each other all the time, although we'll yell and scream when we need to. But we need to be providing hope for the future. The Democrats are the party of despondency. Everything's bad and you need us to get you out of it. The Republican Party is the party of hope and aspirations and the American dream. If you all are willing to join with leaders all across this country to do that, then we are going to see a greater day, not only for our Republican Party, not only for each other and our children and grandchildren, but for everyone around the world who is dying once again to stand with an America that tells the truth and that they can believe in. When we give them that, we will once again be that shining city on a hill. Thank you all for having me today. I appreciate it very much.